Welcome back to Literary Leap. In this segment of Act 3, Scene 2 from Julius Caesar, Mark Antony continues his masterful funeral speech where he skillfully manipulates the emotions of the Roman citizens. Antony shifts from subtle persuasion to a more direct appeal using Caesar's will and vivid imagery to stir the crowd's feelings of grief and anger. Through irony, repetition, and emotional language, Antony sows doubt about the conspirators' motives and sets the stage for a dramatic shift in public opinion. This part of the scene captures the turning point where the crowd begins to revolt, showing Antony's brilliance as an orator and the power of rhetoric. So we see that Antony reflects on the stark contrast in Caesar's status. He says that just a day ago, Caesar's power and authority were unmatched, and his words carried the weight of the entire world. The word of Caesar might have stood against the world. But now, Caesar lies dead, and no one, not even the poorest or humblest, none so poor, shows him respect to do him reverence. Antony cleverly claims that he does not intend to stir the crowd to anger or rebellion. Antony sarcastically says that inciting rebellion would be an insult to Brutus and Cassius, whom he repeatedly calls honorable men, though he clearly questions their honor. So this repeated phrase, honorable men, becomes ironic as Antony subtly questions their honor and intentions. Antony claims that he would rather wrong Caesar's memory himself and even the people rather than speak against Brutus and Cassius. Now, this is another sarcastic remark as Antony clearly disagrees with their actions. Again, Antony sarcastically repeats that he would not dare wrong Brutus and Cassius, though his tone suggests otherwise. He then introduces Caesar's will, saying he found it in Caesar's private room. He teases the crowd by suggesting that if they were to hear its contents, they would be overwhelmed with grief and devotion. This tactic increases their curiosity and desire to hear it. So we see Antony uses suspense. He delays revealing the will, building tension and excitement in the crowd. Antony imagines the people becoming so moved by the contents of Caesar's will that they would rush to honor him by kissing his wounds and soaking their cloth in his blood as relics. He then exaggerates the reaction of the people to evoke strong emotions. Antony continues the exaggeration, saying the people would even beg for a strand of Caesar's hair to keep as a cherished memory, passing it down in their own will as a valuable legacy. Antony concludes by imagining the people treasuring Caesar's memory so much that they would pass down even small mementos like his hair to their children as an issue, as a prized inheritance. So we see Antony exaggerates how much the people loved Caesar to make them feel guilty for not honoring him enough in his death. So we see that Antony has managed to stir the curiosity in the citizens regarding Caesar's will. The fourth citizen demands to hear Caesar's will, showing his curiosity and interest which Antony has stirred. The whole crowd then grows impatient and unified in their demand to hear the will. So Antony pretends to hesitate, saying it's not appropriate for the crowd to know how deeply Caesar cared for them. Antony's reluctance is false. He fully intends to inflame the crowd, but he pretends otherwise. So Antony flatters the crowd, saying they are humans with feelings, not unfeeling objects. He uses the metaphor of wood and stones that symbolize lifelessness or lack of emotion. He says that the people are not wood and neither are they stones, but they are living, breathing human beings with feelings. He wants, or we can say he rather hints, that if they knew what was in the will, it would provoke them to anger and rebellion. The word inflame and mad create a vivid image of emotional chaos. Antony teases the crowd by suggesting they are heirs to Caesar's generosity but pretending to withhold the will for their own good. So he basically builds a tension by delaying the revelation of the will. Antony knows exactly what would come of it. Come of it here implies the crowd would turn against the conspirators. He knows it, that the crowd would surely go against the conspirators and maybe even attempt to attack and kill them. So he kind of still builds the revelation of the will just in order to make sure that what he truly knows will happen will surely happen. Now, the fourth citizen grows more insistent and he demands Antony to read the will. Now, hearing the citizens demand that he read the will, Antony feigns regret for even mentioning the will, all the while pretending that he might have spoken out of turn. So Antony sarcastically says he's worried about disrespecting Brutus and Cassius by reading the will and stirring the crowd against them. We see Antony's fear is basically insincere. He actually wants to provoke the crowd. The word daggers represents the conspirators' betrayal and murder of Caesar. The citizens now begin to turn against the conspirators, mocking the phrase honorable men that Antony had repeatedly used. The crowd, we see, is now fully inflamed, demanding Antony's read the will. Now, another citizen condemns the conspirators as villains and insists Antony read the will. Now, we see Antony pretends to reluctantly give in to the crowd's demands. He says, "You will compel me then to read the will," as if pretending that he's forced by the crowd to read the will against his own desire. He does not want to read the will, but he's being forced by the crowd. Antony asks the crowd to form a circle around Caesar's body, drawing attention to Caesar's physical presence to evoke more emotions. The mention of Caesar's corpse creates a poignant and emotional scene. Now, Antony theatrically asks permission to come down to the crowd, increasing the drama of the moment. The citizens naturally urge Antony to come down and join them, signaling their full support and trust in him. So we see Antony steps down. Now, Antony's physical movement into the crowd symbolizes his alignment with them and further solidifies their unity against the conspirators. The citizens create a circle around Caesar's body, showing their respect and attention. The citizens ensure space is made around Caesar's body for Antony to address them properly. And we see that the citizens praise Antony as noble, indicating that the citizens now completely and wholly trust him. So Antony asks the crowd to give him space, emphasizing his grief and building suspense. Now, he may appear calm, But basically, Antony is carefully setting the stage to incite the crowd. The citizens naturally obey Antony and they create space for him to deliver his appeal. Antony opens with an emotional appeal, preparing the crowd for the shocking revelation of Caesar's wounds. He appeals to the audience's emotions. Now, Antony begins by describing Caesar's cloak or his mantle, evoking a personal memory of Caesar. The mantle also symbolizes Caesar's identity and greatness. Antony recalls Caesar's victory over the Nervi, a moment of triumph to highlight Caesar's greatness. So here we see reference to Caesar's military victories, which Antony uses in order to evoke the crowd's emotion. Now, Antony points to a specific wound on the cloak, describing it as Cassius's blow. Antony shows another rent or a tear caused by Casca's dagger, calling him envious. Antony then highlights Brutus's betrayal, stressing that Brutus was Caesar's trusted friend. And he vividly describes Caesar's blood flowing after Brutus's stab, adding a dramatic tension. He evokes a graphic and emotional image of Caesar's wounds. Now, Antony goes on to use a metaphor to describe Caesar's blood rushing out like a door being opened, suggesting Caesar's disbelief at Brutus's betrayal. Brutus is then described as Caesar's closest and most trusted ally. Angel is a metaphor that represents Brutus's perceived loyalty and goodness. Antony appeals to the gods to emphasize Caesar's love for Brutus. Antony calls Brutus's stab the most painful betrayal. He argues that it wasn't the physical wounds but Brutus's ingratitude that truly broke Caesar. We see personification in the word ingratitude, which is given the power to vanquish Caesar. Now, Antony says Caesar's heart metaphorically broke due to Brutus's betrayal. He describes Caesar's fall, tying it to Pompey's statue, a symbol of irony as Caesar had defeated Pompey. Caesar, the conqueror of Pompey, now falls at Pompey's statue. He vividly describes the setting and Caesar's fall. So Antony then appeals to the crowd, emphasizing the enormity of Caesar's death. He heightens the emotional impact. Antony claims that Caesar's fall symbolized the fall of everyone and treason gained power. Once again, we see the use of personification. Treason is depicted as something that flourishes. Antony then notes that the crowd is crying, calling their tears a sign of their goodness. Gracious drops is a metaphor that describes tears. Antony points out that the crowd is already weeping just from seeing Caesar's cloak. He unveils Caesar's body, presenting it as evidence of the conspirator's crime. And this is used to evoke pity and anger by showing the crowd Caesar's body. Now, seeing Caesar's mutilated body, the citizens naturally react emotionally and they condemn the conspirators and they mourn Caesar. The crowd by now has become violent and are ready to avenge Caesar's death. So we see that the citizens' transformation highlights the power of persuasive speech in inciting action and rebellion in them. But Antony urges the citizens to pause and listen to him, kind of maintaining control or a hold over the crowd. The citizens demand silence, acknowledging Antony's status as noble, which reflects their growing respect and trust in him. The citizens pledge their loyalty to Antony, even expressing their willingness to die for him. So we see there's an exaggeration in their devotion when they say we'll die with him. Antony, however, feigns modesty, pretending he does not want to provoke them to rebellion, though we know that his intentions are exactly that he does want to provoke a rebellion. Now, Antony's words contrast his true intentions of inciting a mutiny. He sarcastically calls the conspirators honorable, repeating the phrase to highlight their hypocrisy. So the word honorable is used repeatedly for ironic emphasis. Antony pretends ignorance of the conspirators' motives, making them appear petty and unjustified. He sarcastically reinforces the idea that the conspirators have valid reasons, knowing the crowd will begin to doubt them. And we see this is nothing but sarcasm. Antony undermines the conspirators' integrity while pretending to praise them. Remember, he keeps on calling them honorable, and over here he says they are wise and honorable and will, no doubt, with reasons answer you. So Antony denies that he is manipulating the crowd, though he is doing exactly that. He is indeed winning their heart through his speech and also inciting them against the conspirators. He humbles himself, claiming he is not as skilled in oration as Brutus is, which endears him to the crowd. So Antony claims he is no orator, but his speech proves otherwise. Antony portrays himself as a simple, honest man who loved Caesar, appealing to the crowd's emotions. He appeals to the audience's feelings by presenting himself as being relatable. Now we see Antony subtly points out that the conspirators allowed him to speak, planting a doubt about their judgment. He ironically claims he lacks the skills to inspire a rebellion, while his speech proves just the opposite. His humility is false. His words are clearly stirring the crowd. He claims he is only stating the truth, further convincing the crowd of his sincerity. Antony personifies Caesar's wounds, suggesting that they are crying out for justice. The wounds are described as dumb mouths, and the repetition of the word poor emphasizes the tragedy. So Antony suggests that if he were Brutus, he would incite a rebellion. He claims that Caesar's wounds would compel even the stones of Rome to revolt. So Antony imagines trading places with Brutus to highlight his own restraint. And the wounds, as I mentioned, are compared to mouths with tongues. Now, we see that the crowd fully succumbs to Antony's manipulation and they openly call for revenge. The citizens are enraged and decide to hunt down and punish the conspirators. Then Antony continues to control the crowd, pretending to calm them while actually fueling their rage further. The citizens demand silence to listen to Antony, fully under his influence. We see they are completely influenced by Antony. So Antony continues his masterful manipulation of the crowd by pretending to be a plain, blunt man, while delivering a highly rhetorical and emotionally charged speech. He uses irony, and personification to turn the crowd against the conspirators, ultimately inciting them to mutiny. The citizens shift from passive listeners to enraged avengers, and they highlight, and rather, this highlights Antony's skill as an orator and his calculated use of words to achieve his goal. So Antony stops the citizens pretending to question their devotion to Caesar. He subtly reinforces Caesar's deserving nature while feigning confusion. He appears to question their loyalty, but he's actually strengthening it. Antony then reminds them of Caesar's will, hinting at its contents to heighten their curiosity and attachment to Caesar. He evokes pity by suggesting the citizens' ignorance, and in doing so, he builds an anticipation about the will. So, on being reminded about the will, the citizens eagerly demand to hear Caesar's will, showing how Antony's manipulation has succeeded. So, Antony reveals Caesar's generosity. Every Roman citizen will receive 75 drachmas. So, Antony uses the material benefits of Caesar's will to further sway the citizens. So, it establishes Caesar's nobility through his act of generosity. The citizens, enraged and inspired by Caesar's generosity, vow to avenge his death. Their sudden fervor shows exaggerated loyalty and anger. But then Antony asks them to be calm, and he tries to keep control of the situation. Antony elaborates on Caesar's will, revealing that Caesar left his gardens and orchards to the citizens for their enjoyment, and he describes the gardens and orchards vividly, appealing to the citizens' senses and emotions. He then emphasizes that Caesar left his property not just for them but for their descendants, showcasing his selflessness. So he appeals to the citizens' emotions by highlighting Caesar's care for their future. Antony praises Caesar as unparalleled, inciting admiration and grief among the citizens. So this suggests that no one could ever replace Caesar, and in doing so it expresses admiration and evokes strong emotions in the hearts and minds of the people. The citizens now vow to cremate Caesar's body in a sacred ceremony and use the flames to burn the homes of the conspirators. So, the reputation of never never emphasizes their conviction. The citizens become violent, ready to use anything as fuel for their destructive revenge. They use the phrases like plug down benches, plug down forms, windows, anything. So this shows that they are so angered that they are ready to take up anything, use anything as fuel to destroy the homes of the conspirators and avenge Caesar's death. The intensity of their actions escalates as they begin to destroy the property or talk about destroying the property. Antony, satisfied with the chaos he has incited, leaves the citizens to their destructive plans. Mischief is given human qualities. It's a personification as though it is a living force unleashed by Antony. Now, a servant informs Antony that Octavius, Caesar's heir, has arrived in Rome. Antony immediately asks where Octavius is, showing his eagerness to ally with him. The servant reports that Octavius and Lepidus, another ally, are at Caesar's house, signaling the gathering of Caesar's supporters. So here we see that Antony expresses confidence that fortune is favoring them, and he plans to meet Octavius immediately to consolidate their position. So fortune is merry. It portrays luck as a cheerful entity. So that's a personification. The servant shares that Brutus and Cassius have fled the city in a state of panic, fearing the anger of the citizens. Antony naturally acknowledges that Brutus and Cassius fled because they realized how effectively he had turned the people against them. He then instructs the servant to take him to Octavius. So Antony modestly downplays the magnitude of his influence on the people. So we see Antony skillfully manipulates the citizens by revealing Caesar's will and portraying him as a generous and noble leader. This naturally incites the crowd to take violent action against the conspirators. Antony's rhetorical mastery reaches its peak as he allows mischief to run its course, signaling the triumph of chaos and rebellion. Meanwhile, he prepares to meet Octavius, confident in the shifting tides of fortune. And with that, we wrap up Act 3, Scene 2 of Julius Caesar. So Antony's masterful rhetoric has completely turned the tide, inciting the citizens to rebellion and setting the stage for the chaos that follows. Shakespeare's brilliance lies in how he uses language to show the power of persuasion and the fragile public opinion. If you found this explanation helpful, don't forget to like and share and subscribe to Literary Leap for more in-depth breakdowns of literary classics. See you in the next video. Until then, happy learning.